The rhetoric surrounding the GOP tax cut plans moving through the House and Senate touts the benefits for ordinary Americans. House Speaker Paul Ryan says a typical family with 2 kids will save nearly $1,200 per year under his plan. Senate Republicans promise middle-class benefits all around and say their plan will generate a $1,500 windfall for the typical family. The Senate plan, for instance, would cut taxes for most but not all individual taxpayers, but only until 2025. Then, all the tax cuts would expire. This is an obvious ruse to hide very real costs and make more room for debt-financed cuts and giveaways, Maya McGuinness of the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget said in a statement. It's also inherently bad policy. It would essentially guarantee a political showdown in 2025, as the deadline for expiration looms and many millions of Americans face a de facto tax increase. The thinking now is that politicians in the future will find a way to avert that tax hike, and extend the cuts. But creating this problem for future taxpayers and policymakers is utter cowardice and terrible planning. We've been through this before. Tax cuts passed in 2001 and 2003 under President George W. Bush were also temporary, and due to expire at the end of 2012. That created the fiscal cliff drama that caused volatility in markets and led to a last-minute deal to extend most of those tax cuts, except for the wealthiest taxpayers. It sort of worked out, in the end. But we might not be so lucky next time. Federal debt as a percentage of GDP is only going up, and at some point, Congress will no longer be able to keep putting off the day of reckoning. Meanwhile, hardly any taxpayers are going to put money aside in anticipation of higher taxes in 2026, setting the stage for a national financial shock. In a word, this idea is just stupid. If tax cuts aren't permanent, they shouldn't be there. Another wrinkle in the Senate plan would offset any tax savings for a certain group of taxpayers. The new provision to repeal the Obamacare mandate, which requires all Americans to have health insurance or obtain an exemption, would lead a few million generally healthy Americans to forgo health insurance. So far, so good, as long as they don't get sick or hurt. That measure would save the government about $30 billion per year, since it would pay less in subsidies to people who qualify for them but decide not to get insurance. The problem is that older workers who don't have an employer-provided plan and earn too much to qualify for Obamacare subsidies would get gut-smacked with premium hikes for coverage that is already exorbitant. Some customers in the so-called individual insurance market, typically those 50 and older, already pay $20,000 and up in annual premiums, not including out-of-pocket costs. With fewer healthy customers paying into the system, insurers will have no choice but to raise premiums for those who remain, and middle-income workers who get no help from subsidies will have to pay the full freight or go without. A middle-class tax cut sure is complicated. Confidential tip line, Rick Newman at News Pulse. Encrypted communication available. Rick Newman is the author of 4 books, including Rebounders, How Winners Pivot from Setback to Success. Follow him on Twitter, at Rick Newman.